Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The invitation had arrived on thick, creamy cardstock, the kind that whispers of expense and quiet importance. Mr. Vincent Cromwell requests the pleasure of your company for dinner. It read in elegant cursive. My husband, David, had been ecstatic. This is it, Teresa. This is big, he'd said, his eyes shining. Vincent Cromwell was not just his boss. He was the boss, the man who held David's career and by extension, our comfortable life, in his well-manicured hands. I, on the other hand, had felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. These corporate dinners, especially the intimate ones, always made me feel like a carefully examined specimen under a microscope. What to wear? What to say? How to be witty but not too familiar, elegant but not ostentatious. At 52, you'd think I'd have mastered the art of social navigation, but there was always that lingering self-doubt, a faint echo of the shy girl I once was. David, bless his heart, was oblivious to my internal turmoil. He just saw it as an opportunity, a stepping stone. He'd spent the week leading up to it alternating between humming happily and anxiously retying his tie. Vincent mentioned he particularly wanted to meet you, Teresa, he'd said one evening, a touch of pride in his voice. He said he's heard I have a remarkable wife. I'd smiled, a weak, watery thing. Remarkable how? Remarkable at keeping the house running smoothly? Remarkable at remembering his dry cleaning? I loved David dearly, but sometimes I felt like a beautifully framed, slightly faded photograph in his life. Admired, cherished, but rarely looked at closely anymore. Vincent Cromwell's house was as impressive as the man's reputation. Set back from the road, nestled amongst mature trees, it was all understated stone and glass, exuding a quiet confidence. Inside, the air was warm, scented faintly with something woodsy and expensive, and the low murmur of classical music drifted from unseen speakers. It wasn't cold or overly modern, though. There were books everywhere, art that seemed chosen for love rather than status, and a general feeling of lived-in comfort that surprised me. Vincent greeted us at the door himself. He was taller than I expected, with a kind face that belied the sharpness in his blue eyes. There were lines of laughter around them, and his handshake was firm but gentle. David, good to see you. And this must be Teresa. It's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you. His voice was a warm baritone, and he looked directly at me when he spoke, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. Not the dismissive glance I sometimes got from David's colleagues, the "oh, you're the wife" look. This was different. I felt seen. There were only two other couples there, which eased my anxiety somewhat. One was a younger pair, clearly still in the honeymoon phase of their careers and marriage, bright-eyed and eager. The other was an older couple, elegant and serene, who seemed to know Vincent well. The conversation flowed easily, lubricated by excellent wine and Vincent's skill as a host. He had a way of drawing people out, asking thoughtful questions and actually listening to the answers. I found myself relaxing, the knot in my stomach slowly uncoiling. David was in his element, talking about his latest project with a passion that I hadn't seen in him for a while. I watched him, a pang of affection mixed with a familiar wistfulness. He was a good man, my David. A hard-working man. Perhaps a little too focused on the latter, but his intentions were always good. Vincent listened intently to him, nodding, occasionally interjecting with a surprisingly insightful comment that showed he was more than just a figurehead. He understood the nuts and bolts of the business. Dinner was served in a dining room that overlooked a beautifully lit garden. The table was set exquisitely, but again it wasn't stuffy. It felt like a meal among friends, albeit very successful friends. I was seated next to Vincent. My initial trepidation had faded, replaced by a quiet curiosity. He spoke to me about my interests, not just as David's wife but as Teresa. He'd heard I enjoyed gardening, and he asked about my small rose garden with genuine interest, even knowing the names of a few varieties I mentioned. He talked about his own attempts at growing tomatoes, making humorous, self-deprecating remarks that had us both laughing. There was a moment during a lull in the general conversation when he turned to me, his blue eyes thoughtful. David tells me you have a keen eye for detail, Teresa, he said, his voice soft enough that only I could hear. I felt a blush creep up my neck. Oh, I don't know about that. I murmured, flustered. David tends to exaggerate. Vincent smiled. I don't think so. He mentioned you once helped him rethink a marketing presentation, spotted something everyone else had missed. Something about the human element. I was stunned. David had never told me Vincent knew about that. It had been years ago, a small thing really. David had been struggling with a campaign, and I'd merely pointed out that it felt a bit cold, too corporate, lacking the personal touch that connects with people. I'd sketched out a few ideas on a napkin, thinking nothing of it. He'd used them, and the campaign had been a success. He'd thanked me, of course, but I never imagined it would reach Vincent Cromwell's ears. It was nothing, really, I said, trying to downplay it. But Vincent was looking at me with an intensity that was unnerving yet intriguing. I believe the ability to see the human element, Teresa, is far from nothing. It's perhaps the most valuable asset one can have in business and in life. His words hung in the air between us, a quiet acknowledgement of something I hadn't even consciously valued in myself. For the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of something beyond just being David's wife. A sense of being recognized for a part of me that had long been dormant, or at least, unacknowledged by the world outside my own small sphere. The night was still young, but I had a distinct feeling that this was no ordinary dinner party. The way Vincent looked at me, the way he spoke, it was as if he was seeing potential I'd forgotten I possessed. The air was thick with unspoken possibilities, a subtle tension that was more exciting than alarming. As the main course was cleared, Vincent leaned slightly towards me, his expression serious but kind. Teresa, he began, his voice a low murmur that barely reached across the small space separating our chairs. David has often spoken of your support, your sound judgment. But tonight, hearing you speak, observing your insights on even small things, I see more than just a supportive spouse. He paused, and my heart gave a little flutter, a mix of nerves and anticipation. What was he leading to? The other guests were engaged in their own conversations, David animatedly discussing something with the gentleman across the table. It felt as if Vincent and I were in our own little bubble. I've been thinking about a new initiative within the company, he continued. Something a bit unconventional. It's less about spreadsheets and profit margins, and more about, well, about the soul of the company, its connection with the community, with our people. It requires a different kind of intelligence, an emotional acuity. He looked at me directly, his gaze unwavering. I know this is unorthodox and certainly unexpected, but I've found that sometimes the most brilliant insights come from perspectives outside the usual corporate structure. I held my breath, my mind racing. What was he implying? Surely not a job. I hadn't worked formally in over 20 years, not since the children were small. My world had been our home, our family supporting David. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. David's team is central to our future, Vincent said, and he's an excellent manager of projects and people. But this initiative I'm thinking of, it needs a different touch. Someone who can see the nuances, the unspoken needs, the human element you identified so clearly all those years ago, and even tonight, in your observations. He smiled, a warm, encouraging expression. Forgive me if this is too forward, Teresa, but I was wondering if you might be willing to share some of your thoughts with me on this, perhaps in a more formal capacity. Not as an employee, necessarily, not yet anyway, but as a consultant, a fresh pair of eyes. I believe you could offer a perspective that we are sorely lacking. My mind reeled. A consultant? Me. The woman who fretted over canapes and small talk? It was so far outside my realm of experience, yet a tiny forgotten spark within me flickered to life. He wasn't offering me a promotion in the traditional sense, not a climb up some corporate ladder. This felt like something else entirely. It felt like he was offering me a chance to be more, to use parts of myself I'd packed away, labeled not for professional use. Vincent, I don't know what to say. I stammered, my cheeks warm. I'm flattered, truly, but I have no formal experience in anything like that. Experience comes in many forms, Teresa, he said gently. Life experience, raising a family, managing a home, observing the world with a keen and compassionate eye. That's a wealth of experience that boardrooms often overlook. I'm not looking for a CV filled with corporate jargon. I'm looking for authenticity, for insight. He paused, then added, think of it as a promotion of your unique perspective into a sphere where it can make a real difference. A promotion. The word resonated, but not in the way David might have envisioned. This wasn't about status or a bigger paycheck for our household through him. This was about me, about recognizing something in me. The intimacy of the suggestion, made in this quiet, personal way, was overwhelming. It was unexpected, yes, but the way he framed it, with such genuine respect for what I might offer, made it feel right. Consensual in the deepest sense. He was inviting me to step into a role, not pushing me. David, still engrossed in his conversation, laughed heartily at something his dinner companion said. He had no idea of the seismic shift that had just occurred in the quiet space between his wife and his boss. I looked at Vincent, at the earnestness in his eyes, the belief he seemed to have in me, a belief I hadn't dared to have in myself for so long. I would be honored to discuss it further, Vincent, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. A small smile touched his lips. Excellent. I'm very glad to hear that, Teresa. The subtle tension that had been building all evening didn't dissipate, but it transformed. It was no longer the tension of anxiety, but the electric hum of possibility. The night, I sensed, was about to steer my life in an entirely new direction. All thanks to a conversation I never anticipated, and a promotion that had nothing to do with climbing a corporate ladder, and everything to do with rediscovering myself. The rest of the dinner passed in a bit of a haze for me. Not an unpleasant one, more like a dreamlike state where everything seemed slightly brighter, more vivid. I participated in the conversations, I laughed, I listened, but underneath it all, Vincent's words echoed, his offer replaying in my mind. A promotion of perspective. It was such an elegant way to put it. He didn't make me feel unqualified, he made me feel uniquely qualified. When our eyes met across the table, there was a new understanding there, a shared secret almost, though it was nothing clandestine, merely a recognition of potential. David was in high spirits on the drive home. Well, that went splendidly, didn't it? Vincent seemed to be in a great mood. And he really took a shine to you, Teresa. I told you he would. He reached over and squeezed my hand. You were wonderful, honey. Charming and witty. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. Thank you, dear. He's a very gracious host. I didn't mention Vincent's proposal, not yet. It felt too new, too personal. I needed to hold it close, examine it in the quiet of my own thoughts before sharing it. Even with David, it wasn't that I wanted to keep it from him, but I needed to understand it myself first. It felt like a delicate seed that needed careful tending before being exposed to the elements. Back home, as I was getting ready for bed, taking off the pearl earrings that had felt like a costume earlier but now seemed almost fitting, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There was a different light in my eyes, a spark I hadn't seen in years. The woman looking back at me seemed less faded, more defined. Was this what personal discovery felt like? This quiet thrum of excitement? This sense of a door creaking open to a room I hadn't known existed within myself? Vincent had said he'd be in touch later in the week to arrange a proper meeting to discuss his initiative. The thought filled me not with dread, as such an idea might have done even that morning, but with a curious blend of nervousness and eagerness. What would I wear to such a meeting? What would I say? But these questions were different now. They weren't born of insecurity, but of a desire to prepare, to engage meaningfully. The mutual respect I'd felt from Vincent was a powerful thing. He hadn't condescended or flattered. He'd spoken to me as an equal, someone whose thoughts held inherent value. It was a stark contrast to how I often felt, not just in corporate settings, but sometimes even in my own life, relegated to a supporting role, my own script unwritten or unread. This wasn't about replacing David, or diminishing his role, or even about a career in the traditional sense. It was about adding a new dimension to my own life, reclaiming a part of myself that had been quietly waiting. Lying in bed that night, David's steady breathing a familiar comfort beside me, I thought about the phrase unexpected but consensual. Vincent's offer was certainly unexpected, but my acceptance, my willingness to explore this, felt deeply consensual. A true yes from a part of me that had been silent for too long. It wasn't about an office or a title. It was about being seen, being valued for my mind, my insights. The emotional connection wasn't romantic. It was deeper, more fundamental. A connection of understanding and respect. It was the connection of one human being recognizing the untapped potential in another. The climax of the evening hadn't been a dramatic announcement or a grand gesture. It had been a quiet conversation, a thoughtful proposal that had the power to reshape my perception of myself and my future. The promotion Vincent offered was far more profound than any corporate advancement. It was an invitation to grow, to contribute in a way I hadn't imagined. The vivid descriptions of his home, the warm lighting, the taste of the wine, the earnest look in his eyes. All these details were now etched in my memory, part of the tapestry of a night that promised change. And as I drifted off to sleep, it wasn't with anxiety, but with a quiet sense of anticipation for what was to come. A new chapter was beginning, not just in a story, but in my life. The following days were filled with a quiet hum of anticipation. I found myself looking at the world a little differently, noticing details I might have overlooked before. It was as if Vincent's belief in my perceptive abilities had somehow sharpened them. I replayed our conversation many times, dissecting his words, my responses, the gentle yet profound respect he had shown me. I still hadn't told David about the specifics of Vincent's proposal. I wanted to wait until Vincent contacted me again, until it felt more concrete. Part of me, a small insecure part, still wondered if I had imagined the significance of it, if perhaps he'd been merely polite. But then on Wednesday afternoon, an email arrived. It was from Vincent Cromwell. My heart did a little flip. The subject line was simple: following up on our conversation. The email itself was brief and professional, yet it carried the same warmth I'd felt from him in person. He reiterated his interest in my perspective for his new community engagement initiative and proposed we meet the following week to discuss it in more detail. He suggested his office, or if I preferred, a more informal setting. He even offered to send over a preliminary outline of his ideas beforehand, so I could gather my thoughts. Reading his words, any lingering doubts I had vanished. This was real. He was serious. I chose his office. If I was going to step into this new territory, I wanted to do it properly. I replied, keeping my tone equally professional, but conveying my genuine interest. The act of typing that email, of committing to this next step, felt empowering. That evening, I finally told David. We were in the kitchen. I was making dinner, and he was recounting his day. I waited for a natural pause, then took a deep breath. David, I began. Something else happened at Vincent's dinner party, something I wanted to talk to you about. He turned, his expression curious. I explained Vincent's observations, his idea for the new initiative, and his proposal for me to consult, to offer my perspective. To his credit, David listened intently, his initial surprise giving way to a thoughtful expression. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. I braced myself for, I wasn't sure what. Skepticism? Concern that I was getting in over my head? Or perhaps even a touch of possessiveness about his boss's attention? Instead, he smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. Teresa, that's wonderful. He came over and put his arms around me. I always knew you were brilliant. I guess I just got used to having all that brilliance to myself. There was a hint of apology in his tone, a recognition, perhaps, that he hadn't always voiced his appreciation for those deeper qualities. Vincent's a smart man, he continued, pulling back slightly to look at me. He sees talent. And you, my dear, have it in spades. What kind of initiative is it? I explained what little I knew, emphasizing the focus on human connection and community. As I spoke, I saw a new kind F_light in David's eyes as well. Not just pride, but also a genuine interest. We talked for a long time that evening, more deeply than we had in ages, about my thoughts, my tentative ideas, even my fears about stepping into such an unfamiliar role. He was incredibly supportive, offering encouragement and practical advice. Don't underestimate yourself, Teresa, he said. You've been consulting for me for years unofficially. You have a gift for this. His support was like a balm to my nerves. It wasn't that I needed his permission, but his belief in me fortified my own. The promotion Vincent had offered was personal, yet it was already beginning to ripple outwards, enriching our connection. It wasn't pulling me away from David, but rather, it felt like it was allowing me to bring more of myself to our relationship. The week leading up to my meeting with Vincent was a period of intense, albeit quiet, preparation for me. He sent over a brief outline as promised. It was about fostering better relationships between the company's various national branches and their local communities, encouraging volunteerism, and creating programs that had a tangible positive impact beyond just business. It was ambitious, idealistic even, but reading it, I felt a spark of excitement. This was something I could connect with, something that resonated with my own values. I spent hours thinking, jotting down notes, not about corporate strategy, but about people, about how to build trust, how to listen, how to make large organizations feel human and accessible. I thought about my own experiences with community groups, my volunteer work at the local library years ago, the subtle dynamics of neighborhood gatherings. It was, as Vincent had suggested, drawing on a different kind of experience. The day of the meeting, I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant navy dress. I wanted to look professional, but also approachable, true to myself. Driving to Vincent's office building, a sleek tower of glass and steel, I felt a flutter of nerves, but it was overshadowed by a sense of purpose. This wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about contributing something meaningful. Vincent's office was on the top floor, with panoramic views of the city. But like his home, it wasn't intimidating. It was spacious and light-filled, with comfortable chairs and shelves filled with books, alongside the usual business accoutrements. He greeted me with the same warm, direct gaze. "Teresa, thank you for coming. Please make yourself comfortable." We talked for over 2 hours. He started by explaining his vision in more detail, his passion for the project evident in his voice. Then he turned to me. "So, Teresa," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what are your initial thoughts? And please be candid. That's why you're here." And so, I began to speak. I talked about the importance of authenticity, of ensuring that these community initiatives weren't just PR exercises, but genuine efforts to connect and contribute. I shared some ideas about starting small, focusing on listening to community needs rather than imposing prepackaged solutions. I even found myself sketching out a little diagram on a notepad he offered, illustrating how different parts of the company could engage. I spoke from the heart, but also, I realized, from a place of quiet observation that had been my companion for years. Vincent listened, truly listened. He didn't interrupt, except to ask clarifying questions, or to encourage me to elaborate. There was no judgment, only interest. He made me feel like my ideas were not just welcome, but valuable. As I spoke, I felt a transformation within myself. The shy, uncertain woman who had dreaded dinner parties was replaced by someone articulate, thoughtful, and surprisingly confident in her own insights. It was as if Vincent's belief in me had unlocked a voice I barely knew I possessed. The promotion was continuing, not as a single event, but as an ongoing process of him drawing out my potential, and me daring to step into it. When I finally paused, a little breathless, he was smiling. "Teresa," he said, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm, "this is exactly what I was hoping for. Your insights are invaluable. You've brought a clarity and a human focus to this that has been missing." He picked up the notepad where I'd sketched my diagram. "This simple drawing? It speaks volumes. It's about connection, not hierarchy. That's the ethos we need." He then outlined how he envisioned my role, if I were willing. It would be part-time, flexible, reporting directly to him. He wanted me to help shape the strategy, to be a sounding board, perhaps even to visit some of the branches, to listen and observe. He named a consulting fee that was more than generous, but honestly, the money was secondary. What mattered was the opportunity, the validation. "So, Teresa," he said, his blue eyes twinkling, "are you ready to be officially promoted to our company's conscience, its heart?" I laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "Vincent, I would be honored. And very excited." The handshake that sealed our agreement was firm, a symbol of a new beginning. Walking out of that office building and into the bright afternoon sunshine, I felt like I was walking on air. I was no longer just David's wife, or a keeper of the home. I was Teresa, a woman with a voice, with ideas, with a new and unexpected path opening up before her. The reflection and growth had already begun, and it felt wonderful. This journey of personal discovery, sparked by an unexpected conversation with my husband's boss, was proving to be the most rewarding promotion of all.